So good morning. Welcome to the Downey Center for Spiritual Living. I'm Reverend Kevin Kadel, and I have the honor and privilege of presenting our message this week. So let's get right to it if we could. Our theme for the entire year of 2021, coming to a close shortly, is timeless wisdom and evolutionary vision. Our theme for November is breathe in the view. Certainly that music sets me to breathing in the view, even from my little room here that I join our Zoom gathering. And today the message is seeing beauty and feeling grace. It was prepared lovingly by practitioner J.J. Giudici from the Greater Cincinnati Center for Spiritual Living. So thank you, J.J. And our additional theme is the abundance is real, let's keep it flowing. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about affluence, abundance, and generosity. Now, the specifics, I love breathe in the view because this annual theme has moved all of us to a higher level of consciousness, and therefore the view that you and I see from here is grander, even by a small way, but really probably in big ways by now. The evolutionary vision that's carried us to this point is envisioning a world in which has renewed its emphasis on beauty and nature and love through the resurgence of creativity, art, and aesthetics. And this comes from our global vision at Centers for Spiritual Living. And the timeless wisdom aspect of this is that you learn and then you know and then you believe that heaven is a local state of consciousness, meaning that that is a consciousness that is local to your consciousness, to your feeling and sensing and thinking. And you experience this heaven here and now to the degree that you become conscious of heavenliness, is what I will call it. A rightness with yourself, a rightness with those beings in your life, and a rightness with the world. And it begins with a moment, sometimes now and then, sporadically, but then more frequently, and then more deeply and more moving. And this is just a naturally occurring feeling. And this comes from a dedication to advancing your soul through this incarnation. As Reverend Michael Beckwith says, every single day you must wake up and say, open my eyes that I may see a glorious reality. Open my eyes so that I may see a glorious reality. And as practitioner JJ has set up for us today, this message of seeing beauty and feeling grace. And that means that you appreciate that inward feeling of spirit within, that you are present to it, and that you recognize those moments of holy communion that we might refer to as grace. Now, to look at this more from a science of mind perspective, beauty is a quality of God. And like all other qualities of God in our teaching, it is an inward feeling. Those positive sensations that you have at times experienced. In the case of beauty, it might be that you sense something beautiful, right? And in response to that sensing something beautiful, it might be a sight or a sound or a taste or a touch, something that calls forth beauty that's already within you, right? So that's the experience of beauty. You also might feel beauty and act upon it by expressing beauty, and you could express that beauty in all kinds of ways, in the same ways that you sense it, right? You might express beauty in sight or sound or touch or taste. Now, just remember that in science of mind, right, those positive feelings, those inward sensations are the activity of God within you, right? How you know there is a God and how you know that it is within you is by those inward sensations, by those feelings, right? And that in this human phase of your soul's journey, that is your direct connection with the divine. It cannot be more clear than that, I feel. So those feelings then can go on to be expressed as emotions, and emotions become a bodily feeling, a manifestation of those feelings, right? And those feelings then give rise to, you can choose to express them as emotions. Emotions then become a cause of a further revelation about you and your consciousness. They become a kind of mirror for you. Those emotions tell you something about yourself, and they move your body and mind to a new level of consciousness. Now, as I often say, we're here to feel better. And in the ways that you feel better, you affirm, you speak your word for those qualities, those good inward sensations, to feel those, right? I know it's simple, but feelings are that primary demonstration of treatment. You know your prayer is answered when you feel better. And those feelings are evoked by way of your spiritual practice, right? Now, as I say, you could go on to express those feelings in some way, but just once you have that inward sensation, you've got your answered prayer. How it manifests, there are a lot of choices that you can make, how that might specifically express, experience, circulate, connect in your life. Now, the science of mind might be one of the few world religions that does not require adopting a belief of God or in God. Rather, as you practice these principles, you naturally catch a glimpse of something truly fantastic. You connect with that, you commune with that, if even only for a moment, and that is those moments of transcendence that expand and grow your consciousness. Now, I can remember, I think I was in a pre-practitioner class, and one of my fellow students was really struggling this concept of God. We freely talk about, Ernest Holmes talks about, and therefore we talk about in our teaching, what he describes, Ernest Holmes described as God, a universal presence, an infinite creative, a divine intelligence, an ultimate reality. But for this student, those descriptions really didn't ring that student's bell. It didn't really resonate. And of course, the instructor moved on to this bridge that I've already built for you, and that internal positive feelings are God within, expressing, experience, circulating, connecting. So as one feels love, one is experiencing God as love. As one shares joy, one is circulating God as joy. And the quality that resonated with this student was the quality of beauty. Aha, beauty is an attribute, an aspect of the divine. So the God of this student's understanding began with the moment that the student recalled moments where the student was wrapped with beauty. It was already a familiar feeling. It now had a new context. It now had a deeper meaning. And beauty then expanded that student's conscious awareness of other positive feelings, other qualities of God, so that the student now could begin to see the God in everything. The student now had a real inward experience of God, and therefore this student's understanding of God grew from there. So Francis Bacon said, beauty itself is but the sensible image of the infinite. Beauty itself is but the sensible image of the infinite. I love that. And here's what Ernest Holmes has to say about our next aspect of today's message, and that is the aspect of grace, right? So Ernest Holmes says, grace is the givingness of spirit to its creation, the logical result of the correct acceptance of life and a correct relationship to spirit. He goes on to say, you are saved by grace to the extent that you believe in, accept, and seek to embody the law of good, which is ever a law of liberty, right? So grace in the science of mind, as Ernest Holmes said, is not a special law, but a specialized law. There's kind of a difference. So grace is a specialized state of consciousness that naturally occurs as a result of your spiritual perseverance, right? Your spiritual dedication. And what is specialized about this law is it tends to supersede a sequence that we teach in metaphysical law, right? Often we talk about the principle of cause and effect, that thoughts create a reality. The thought is the cause, the effect is what you're perceiving. Well, grace is a principle when you feel it, you have this sort of direct connection, meaning it blows right by cause and effect directly to the healed, not healing. It goes directly to healed. It goes directly to wholeness. It goes directly to that divine source. So more easily and more frequently, those transcendent moments that I referred to before, those are your little glimpses of grace. Those moments in which you have an almost overwhelming feeling of rightness, right? An overwhelming feeling that all is well, sort of an unexplained peacefulness. I mean, even in the midst of what you perceive to be worldly chaos and discord, you still feel that positive presence. You feel attuned to a great compassion, a deep love, an intelligence that knows beyond appearances to something great and rich and full. That is grace in our teaching. So you can see in the context of my fellow student, beauty giving rise to that transcendent moment for that student, and that gives rise to this feeling, this moment of grace upon which greater consciousness accelerates. And Eric Butterworth, the great unity minister, says this about grace. He says, the word grace means favor. He says, why are you favored as a child of God? I could say, are you favored as a child of God? And he says, simply because you are the activity of God expressing itself as you. So you already are that grace. And to the degree that you have that those grace-filled moments, you are in grace, but understand that it's not, as Ernest Holmes said, it's not special, right? Everyone, every creation of God is imbued fully with God. So living spirit favors all its creation, all its circulation, and everything in between. So what is that pivot point for you, right? What quality or set of qualities do you gravitate toward that create the potential, at least? It might be a moment of grace. It could be any one of these, right? So you see all of these spiritual qualities in front of you right now. And the three qualities that I've kind of singled out for our abundance is real, let's keep it flowing theme is affluence, abundance, kind of on the nose, right? And I'll think of it. Anyway, affluence, abundance, and generosity. Those are the ones that I'm drawn to today, and the ones that I work with a lot recently. Now, you might say that's pretty simple, that's pretty easy, it is easy to lay out the concept, right? But you might know in somebody else, certainly not me, that there might be some impediments, there might be some blocks, there might be things that seem to get in the way of you're freely manifesting and demonstrating being the abundant being, experiencing, circulating the abundance in your life. And those blocks often appear as false beliefs or false feelings, false ideas, what we call stinking thinking, of lack, of limitation, of scarcity, of density, of opacity. You might think of other words to describe it. But these are all thoughts and feelings that are blocking that flow of goodness in your life, blocking that flow of goodness through your life, blocking that flow of goodness as an exchange or a connection to other beings in this plane, right? And you also might be unduly influenced by the thinking of the world around you. And Gary Takasian described this beautifully a few weeks ago in talking about, what Ernest Holmes calls race thought. And again, Gary was clear to point out it's not racial. It's just a term that applies to what I will call the mob mentality. And like your own thinking being consciously directed, when the community joins together in one heart and one mind, as Reverend Sunshine likes to call it, a love-minded community, its thinking and its feeling is positive and constructive and productive. But left to chaos and disorder and discord, the mob, the community, the thinking of the world around you can often be not in your better interest. It might be going a different direction than the positivity and the constructivity that you desire and aspire to in your life. So what are the ways in which you can begin to dissolve and disintegrate or work around those blocks, those ways to detach yourself from the thinking of the world around you? And that is through your spiritual practices, right? So in this case, doing daily meditation, doing daily treatment or affirmation or prayer, doing some form of spiritual study. Perhaps journaling becomes a powerful practice for you. And of course, we vision here, so visioning on a regular basis, what is God's high idea for my life this day, this moment? And what is the feeling, the quality, the tone of that high idea? Being of sacred service, right? Going to your spiritual counselor, seeing your practitioner is a form of spiritual practice. Giving as a spiritual practice and joining in the beloved community. So a lot of us are doing many of these spiritual practices already in our time together today. Good on you and well done. So the first quality that I kind of want to focus in on right now is affluence, right? And again, going back to Eric Butterworth, in spiritual economics, he talks about affluence as being in the flow of God, being in the flow of living spirit. And we often hear about peak performers, whether it's doctors or scientists or athletes or actors or musicians or painters or sculptors or dancers or chefs. We often refer to an experience of being in the zone, right? And they're actually in this kind of transcendent state, this altered state of consciousness, where a power, an intelligence, a creativity, a connection to something greater than they thought possible is actually taking over, right? Now, what I want to point out is that affluence is not an anomaly. It's not an adrenaline rush. Don't think about it that way, right? But think about affluence as being the certain demonstration of your minutes and hours and days and months of and years of preparation, right? So the question becomes, of those spiritual practices, what gets you in the flow of living spirit? What gets you there the easiest, the most consistent, the most deeply? Think about focusing on that just to get to those moments of grace. The second one I want to talk about is abundance, right? The abundance is real. Now, feeling abundant can mean you experience large quantities of something. It can mean that there's a big variety. It could mean that there's a high quality, some opulent character to your life experience. And I was just thinking about this the other day. It's like I've had some really memorable meals in my lifetime, right? And it's something that, especially during the pandemic, that's been something that I and everyone has to be really mindful around who we share meals with. But of all of those memorable meals, I don't really remember the food. As good as that food may have been, the quantity, the quality, the variety, but what I can recall are the beautiful people. I can recall the shining faces. I can recall that circulation of God's good happening as at that meal, and the abundance of God's good in activity, in action, in circulation. It was palpable, and it's still to this day, that's what I recall from those great meals. So feeling abundant, like all God's qualities, a little different for each person, which is itself an aspect of the abundance of living spirit, that abundance can be so individually and variously experienced, expressed, circulated by all these different aspects of God that are you and me, God in action, right? The last one is generosity, right? To me, generosity means circulating my good, right? Now, I want to consider the opposite of being generous, right? The opposite of being generous is where I stop my flow, that I cut it off, where there is something hesitant about just being open and giving without any second thought, without any hesitance or resistance, right? And when those blocks to generosity arise, right? I'm stopping the flow. So I go back to affluence. And am I in the flow of spirit? And if I'm in the flow of spirit, generosity is a natural quality of being in that flow. If I'm not being generous, I'm stopping the flow. That means I'm stopping it both ways. I'm stopping the inflow and the outflow, right? So I've often said that, spirituality, being on this path is dynamic. It has to be in motion. When it is stopped for any reason, we're stopping that flow. I'm stopping that goodness that's already occurring within me. I'm stopping that from continuing and growing. As Reverend Michael often says, you can only have truly what you freely give. Just think about that. It's like if I really want to hang on to something with a tight grip, I've stopped the flow. But when I am an open conduit for that good, it's flowing freely. And what happens is when I'm in the flow, I'm actually reenacting this unlimited circulation of living spirit. And as you circulate with a consciousness of abundance, your capacity to circulate more good grows. What you appreciate appreciates. So as Reverend Michael says, the truth is that there's more than enough good to go around. There is more enough power, love, and joy. And all of this begins to come through a mind that is aware of its own infinite nature. So I'll close today with a few affirmations. As I sense beauty, I feel God's grace within. I marvel at the beauty and grace that dwells within all creation. My life is spirit living itself through and as me. And with that, I know all the best for you today. Thank you very much for joining us here today. And so it is.